American Top 40.
16 acts are in American Top 40 for the very first time. This is one of them. The group is Foreigner, and the song at number 29, first week on the chart, is a big one. Feels like the first time. At number 29 on American Top 40, a half English and half American group who call themselves Foreigner, and their song feels like the first time.
American Top 40.
Well, now I have the song by the rock group Foreigner, whose lead guitarist a few months ago learned the hard way that it can cost you not to be humble. Guitar player Mick Jones got hooked on tennis a while back and started taking lessons from a pro. And every chance he got, he was out on the nearest courts playing hard and getting better. Well, recently he won a match against his instructor. He beat the pro for the first time, and Mick absolutely gloated. He made a showboat leap over the net to shake hands with the loser. But the net caught his foot and the top half of his body headed for the asphalt. Well, Mick's natural reflex would have been to cushion the fall with his hands. But his instinct as a musician told him, protect those guitar-picking fingers and take the shock on his arms. He did, and fractured his left olecranon. That's the tip of the elbow. Well, that put Mick out of action for 10 days at a very bad time because his group, Foreigner, was in the middle of a tour and the accident knocked out 8 performances. Fortunately, they were able to reschedule them, but it could have been a catastrophe. If Mick had ruined a hand, it would have torpedoed the entire tour and cost them over $500,000. Well, Mick Jones doesn't gloat anymore. His elbow is almost back to normal, and Foreigner's fortunes are on the rise. Their hit single, Cold as Ice, climbs another 4 notches this week to number 16.
You're as cold as ice.
Foreigner on American Top 40 at number 16, fourth week on the chart with Cold as Ice.
American Top 40.
We're up to the current hit by Foreigner, whose leader, Mick Jones, once worked in a show starring the Beatles, but he told us they ignored him until they heard him using foul language. This is Mick Jones's story. In 1964, when the Beatles exploded as superstars, he was just getting started as a rock guitarist. Mick's an Englishman, but he landed a gig in Paris as a backup musician for French superstar Sylvie Vartan. Well, the Beatles were the other star act in the show, and Mick was thrilled. He would actually be associating with the Beatles for several days as they all went about their business of rehearsing and performing. But the Beatles never once spoke to him, and he was too awed to speak to them first. After all, they were superstars, and he was just a sideman. Then, on the night of the last performance, he remembers, in the middle of Sylvie's closing number, just before the Beatles would go on, Mick's guitar strap broke. And when the instrument fell, he let out a few choice Anglo-Saxon 4-letter words right into his open microphone. Well, he finished the set with a very red face, then walked off stage right into the arms of John, Paul, George, and Ringo. The Beatles shook Mick's hand and slapped him on the back and told him how delighted they were to discover a fellow Englishman on the bill. They hadn't been snubbing him at all. They had assumed that a musician in a French act singing backup vocals in French had to be a Frenchman. But when he uttered those Anglo-Saxon expletives over the sound system, they knew he was one of their countrymen. Here's Mick Jones with Foreigner and their latest hit at number 32 in our countdown, Urgent. At number 32 in our survey, moving up 5 big notches, second week on the chart, that's Urgent by Foreigner.
American Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem. Now we're up to the latest hit by the act who went from zero popularity to headliner status so fast they couldn't get opening acts for their concerts because other bands didn't know who they were. This band of Englishmen and Americans formed in 1976. In 1977, they put out their first album and went on a 2-week tour to promote it. At the time, they were the opening act for the Doobie Brothers. Well, that 2-week tour stretched into 7 months on the road, and by the time that tour was over, that opening act was no longer opening. They had become headliners themselves. That's because in 3 short months, they had scored with a number 4 single, Feels Like the First Time, and a smash debut album that went to number 4 on the album chart. An album titled Foreigner, by the band called Foreigner. But their whirlwind success caused an unexpected problem. Here was Foreigner with both a top 5 single and album. They were one of the hottest new concert attractions in the country, but they couldn't find any established opening acts. When other acts were approached about opening, they said, "Why should we? Who are they and what have they done?" Foreigner's drummer Dennis Elliott says, "It was frightening. Some groups take 4 or 5 years to be a headliner. We did it in 3 months." These days, Foreigner is truly an established group and have no trouble at all finding opening acts. They do the choosing. Their 13th Top 40 hit is at number 21 this week. Foreigner and I Want to Know What Love Is.
Gotta take a little time.
Foreigner on American Top 40, moving from 32 to 21. The biggest mover in the countdown, 11 notches. I Want to Know What Love Is. It's from the LP, Agent Provocateur.
American Top 40.
These are the hits as ranked by Billboard magazine. Now on American Top 40, we're up to a hit by a musician who went completely deaf in one ear listening to his own band. There probably isn't a rock musician working today who hasn't worried about the possibility of at least partial hearing loss. But for Dennis Elliott, the English drummer for the band Foreigner, deafness became a scary reality. During a tour a few years ago, the band were tuning up before a performance when all of a sudden Dennis felt a sharp pain in his left ear. And within a few seconds he couldn't hear anything in that ear at all. Dennis told us he'd never been so scared in his life. It's bad enough for anybody to lose his hearing, but for a musician, it can mean the end of a career. Well, the next morning, doctors told Dennis what he already knew, that his deaf ear was a victim of those powerful speakers that he sat so close to during Foreigner's performances. And if he kept it up, his other ear was next, and the deafness might become permanent. So Dennis took off some time to let his ear heal, and after his hearing came back, decided not to take any more chances. To this day, at every performance and rehearsal, Foreigner's drummer Dennis Elliott wears earplugs in both ears. Their latest hit debuts at number 37 this week on American Top 40. Here's Foreigner with That Was Yesterday.
I thought I knew you well.
Foreigner with the follow-up to their number 1 song, I Want to Know What Love Is. Another hit from the LP Agent Provocateur. It debuts at number 37, and it's titled That Was Yesterday, as the countdown continues.
Casey's Coast to Coast.